Chapter 17. Hearing Voices. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. Ryuga repeated to himself over and over again as he walked through the forest. His mind began to fill with all sorts of thoughts. I've never been in a real fight. Well, at least not one where I fought back. Ryuga whispered to himself. With each step, he couldn't help but feel a sense of impending dread. He hated confrontations for the most part. He only fought when necessary, and Ryuga was having a difficult time switching gears. He was now the predator, and he needed to fight with fang and tooth in order to survive. Relax. For a moment, Ryuga thought he was going crazy. He spun around wildly, his hands ready to strike as he searched for the origin of the strange voice. Stop embarrassing us. It's me, dum-dum, Drake's voice said, reverberating in Ryuga's head. Drake? I thought you were tired. Wait, how are you speaking to me right now? Because I'm special, Numcake. And I feel like you're going to get us both into trouble. So I'll be helping you out for a while. Just follow my instructions and you'll be okay, Drake directed. Well, thanks. That does make me feel somewhat better. Ryuga whispered to himself. Keep walking. There's a few of them up ahead. Sure enough, as Ryuga peered through the forest trees, he could see several of the small, ghost-like creatures bobbing up and down through the air. This will be perfect practice. Listen up. Your sensei already taught you about basic defense and evasion techniques, right? I want you to get close to those wisps, and when they start to attack, you need to analyze their movements. Don't even think of trying to defeat them until you're used to evading all of their strikes. Okay, Ryuga said as he took a deep breath and steeled himself. It's just 3 of them. Only 3. Only 3. Ryuga recited to himself as he drew closer. Yeah, just 3. Drake said. Drake, Ryuga said with a low, disapproving tone. Here they come. Don't die. Drake commanded as the trio of wisps began to dart towards Ryuga. The creatures sailed through the air effortlessly, and now, more than ever, Ryuga was reminded that they resembled silk jellyfish. I'm not scared, he mumbled to himself as he followed the creatures with his eyes. Their movements were erratic, and they traveled in zigzags as they drew closer. 2 flame wisps, 1 air wisp, Ryuga said, taking note of the creature's affinity as he stepped to his right side. 2 of the creatures sailed right by him. The other struck him squarely in the lower abdomen, causing Ryuga to recoil in pain. Holy shit, that really hurt, he whispered as he rubbed his side. Indeed, but that's because you aren't defending yourself with your sen, Drake commented. As Drake pointed out, one of the key elements in battling sen beasts was to defend oneself with a layer of mana during combat. It was a task that Ryuga had been practicing for weeks, using a full-body aura of mana. He immediately activated the technique at Drake's instruction, then struggled to remember the words of Imelda. This is one of the most basic of defense techniques. It will be very effective against those wisps, and in battles in general. As long as you apply the right amount of mana to your aura, it won't break from attacks. Unfortunately for you, you don't have the experience to determine attacks that will cause you mortal harm, so... Ryuga could hear every word of Imelda's explanation as the 2 fire wisps charged him once more. I need to flare all of my mana until I get better control and battle intuition, Ryuga reminded himself, sidestepping both wisps yet again. And again, the stray air wisp struck him in a blind spot, this time at the base of his spine. Unlike the last impact, however, Ryuga could only feel the sensation of pressure pushing hard against his body. In fact, there was no sensation of pain at all. He now felt foolish for the way he was overreacting. See, it doesn't even hurt. But still, your mana took a significant hit. And this is why your teacher wanted you to practice so often. Even high-ranking Sen warriors use this technique to shrug off minor damage, and in some cases, to reduce damage that might normally kill. I see. Ryuga shouted as he attempted to answer while dodging wisps. Several more had now shown up, changing the enemy count from 3 to slightly more than a dozen. Drake, do you still want me to practice evading these things?
Normally I'd say yes, but you need to start taking some of them out. Otherwise, you'll easily be overwhelmed.
Got it, Ryuga said, determined to switch to offense. Gather the mana, condense it, then fire! Ryuga shouted as he repeated the steps to forming a basic Sen blast aloud. The baseball-sized energy mass sailed forward and struck several of the wisps, which were bunched together. Yeah, got him, Ryuga said in celebration, but it was too soon. For 2 more air wisps smashed into his leg and shoulder. The pressure from the impact was enough to throw him off balance, and this opening was all that the fire wisp needed. Half a dozen of the creatures careened towards Ryuga and smashed into him, exploding in the process. Each blast was like a large firework going off on his skin. If it hadn't been for his aura defense, he would be bleeding, or possibly worse.
Easy pickings. Get the spirit particles they left behind, quick!
Drake directed, prompting Ryuga to quickly capture and pull the particles to himself. What do I do? I can't absorb these while I'm fighting. Ryuga screamed as he fought to evade strikes from many directions.
You don't have to assimilate the energy. Just pull it into your body.
Ryuga's senses were fighting against him. He couldn't multitask fast enough to listen to Drake, pull in spirit particles, and fend off wisps. Within moments, the creatures swarmed him, the air wisps striking his legs and back, while the fire wisps flew towards his head and chest. In the end, all he could do was cover up and endure.
After the fire wisps explode, run away!
Drake shouted over the sound of explosions.
Your aura shield won't be able to hold up much longer.
Ryuga felt a very real fear beginning to take over him as he huddled and waited. The feeling of pain was now beginning to set in, though it was dull and faint. Drake was right. His mana wouldn't last much longer.
Now, run towards the back of the hut as fast as you can.
Drake shouted. Ah! Ryuga screamed as he took off running, several of the wisps in pursuit.
How are you so slow?
Drake shouted. For the first time, Ryuga heard him express genuine concern. I didn't work out much, okay? Ryuga replied as he dashed through the forest, the occasional wisp whizzing by his head. It would be a terrifying 10-minute dash before Ryuga finally ran headlong into the safety of the hut's barrier. I can't believe I almost died again. Ryuga whimpered through heaving breaths as he fell face down on the ground.
I can't believe you're this out of shape. Your conditioning is terrible.
Drake shouted. Ryuga could almost imagine Drake hopping up and down, flailing his tiny little dragon arms. Almost, if he wasn't so exhausted. Ryuga repeated this process several times throughout the first night, in which time he was only able to defeat 60 of the numerous creatures and collect spirit particles from less than half. It would be 2 more days of this terrible performance before he decided to seek additional counsel from Imelda.
You want to know better tips about fighting?
Imelda said, eyes focused on her bowl of food instead of Ryuga. He stood in the doorway, awaiting sage-like wisdom.
Well, there are some things you can only learn with your body through experience. Still, I understand where you're coming from. Just a few weeks ago, this was anything but normal for you. Okay, I can give you 3 major pointers.
Imelda then sat her bowl down and walked outside the hut, beckoning Ryuga to follow her.
The first and second tips can actually be learned at the same time. The absolute most important tip is a skill that most pick up over time. You need to be able to sense concentrated Sen energy of all types at any time. In order to practice this, I'll help you out for an hour, no more. Take a seat over there and make yourself comfortable.
Imelda said, pointing to a nearby tree stump. Ryuga did as requested, then focused his attention on his teacher, who was now standing in front of him.
Now, I want you to close your eyes for this training. Your goal is twofold. The first is to use your senses, not your eyes, to determine where Sen energy is positioned around you. The second goal is to manipulate your mana so you can defend yourself using Aura Shield, but only cover the area you feel will be impacted by my Sen orbs.
Got it. Ryuga said as he closed his eyes. It wasn't much longer than a second before he felt a thumping pop against his lower back. "Ugh, what the?" he shouted, rubbing his back. Pop, pop! 2 more of the bubbles assaulted him. He didn't even have time to recover. "Ow, stop! I'm not even ready yet! Ah!" he shouted more loudly with each successive attack.
You don't have time to get ready in real combat. This too is part of training,
Imelda said with the flick of her wrist. Much like swinging a magical wand, each time a random orb of her Sen energy would appear out of nowhere and quickly strike Ryuga. After 7 direct hits, he hopped to his feet, prompting a warning from Imelda.
I wouldn't do that.
She said calmly as she cautioned Ryuga to sit back in place.
You're going to be a handful.
She sighed to herself as she coaxed the teen back into his seat.
Look,
She said as she flourished her hand once more, revealing dozens of tiny bubble-like orbs floating around Ryuga from all directions and angles. "When did you do all this?" He nearly shouted in indignant protest.
as soon as you sat down, and that's a problem. You see, if I was determined to kill you, for example, you'd have never known. What's more, the creatures you're trying to fight will always attack you in an unpredictable way. The only real way to counteract this is to either dodge or defend. Your goal should be to avoid getting touched by your enemies at all costs. When you absolutely can't avoid taking damage, your priorities should then change to mitigating the damage you take. If possible, you want to reduce damage to absolute 0. The only way to do that,
Imelda continued.
is to learn to sense Sen energy before your eyes register that there's a problem. Also, your range of view is rather limited, so it's helpful to be able to expand your awareness from as many blind spots as possible. When you can do this, evasion becomes easier. You can also anticipate possible defenses if your attempt to evade fails. From that point on, you'll just need to train your body so that you can keep up with your mental reflexes. And since your time is limited, this is the quickest, least fatal way. So stop complaining and prepare yourself.
Imelda said with a grin as she caused all of the training orbs to disappear completely once more. The next 30 minutes of Ryuga's life were full of pain and regret. Slowly, gradually, he became more aware of how to use his senses to detect the location of Sen threats. He was nowhere near the level he needed to be, but Imelda gave him a passing grade by the hour's end. Their training at an end, she retired back into the hut to continue her own nightly ritual of grooming and then sleep.
Well, she's a lot nicer than I am.
Drake whispered as Ryuga headed back towards his usual training spot. "What do you mean?" he asked.
Well, I was just gonna let you figure that out for yourself.
Drake responded. "So you knew that all along and just didn't say anything?" Ryuga nearly shouted, his temper flaring, largely in part due to dull aching pain which ravaged his body.
You already got one present for me to help you out, which you aren't even using, mind you. So why should I keep helping you? Get good, nub.
Drake taunted Ryuga, raising his annoyance to a new level. "Go away," Ryuga blurted out.
Sure thing. Good luck.
Drake said without missing a beat. "Wait, Drake, I was joking. Drake! Drake!" Ryuga was now talking to himself as he dashed along the forest floor. Ryuga whispered to himself as several dozen wisps appeared from the tree.